I would like to formally welcome everyone to the Institute for the Future's Foresight Talks, our first webinar of 2019. Institute for the Future is a nonprofit research and education group based in Palo Alto, California. And our mission is to build global foresight capacity through futures research and futures methods trainings. We do a number of trainings, foresight trainings throughout the year, and many of you have attended those trainings, and many of you are also already partners of IFTF, so we welcome you for this conversation about what it's like to practice futures inside, very successfully, inside a very large, one of the world's leading technology companies. I want to first orient you to the way we're going to run this. And this is the Zoom platform. I think some of you may be familiar and others may not. You are auto muted, so you don't have to worry about muting yourself. You also, we don't have a video feed for all of us because there's too many of us. There are a couple of icons at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A, which you'll notice, and there's a chat. And what we'd like to suggest is if you have a question during the conversation, please submit it via the Q&A. And my colleague Tessa Finlev will be reviewing those, and she'll also be on chat. If you have any issues or problems or just want to chat, she can be over there as well. At the end of the conversation, Ming Li and Harold and I will talk for about half an hour or so, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So really looking forward to those. I'm really excited. We've wanted to invite Ming Li and Harold because they're longtime partners of ours, and they're very experienced foresight practitioners doing incredible work. Both of them have been at Microsoft for a long time, and so they have a really, I think, unique institutional perspective on the role of foresight in an organization like Microsoft. And they have lots of different tools and tricks that they bring to their practice. So Ming Li Chai is a principal in foresight and insight in the Envisioning Group, and her background is in strategy and design. Harold Becker is Director, Industry Engagement and Research, also in the Envisioning Group, and his background is in strategy and marketing. And we're really just going to have an open conversation and find out what they're up to at the Envisioning Group and how they do their work. And we're hoping this will be a practical, insightful conversation. So thank you so much, Ming Li and Harold. We wanted to start off, I think you have some slides that you wanted to share, and that reminds me to let everyone know that this will be archived and recorded, so you'll be able to access this later or share it with others if you like. Wanted to start off with just if you'd give us a sense of what the Envisioning Group is, what kind of work you do, how you're situated in the organization, those kinds of things.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having us on this first webinar. We're super thrilled, excited. Let me share. We have a few slides for you that we thought may be useful to explain a little bit what we do. Let me know when you see this.
We see it.
Great. Ming, do you want to kick it off?
Well, so like the brief intro, I have entered the envisioning space almost like 20 years ago. Started in Herman Miller, now in the Future Insight Group when we were partners with Institute for the Future as well. And I came to the envisioning team. I've been in Microsoft for about 10, 11 years, and most of the time I've been spending in the envisioning team. The envisioning team is a small design-led team. There's 13 of us that we each have our superpower, like planking. But we have designers, we have researchers, we have program managers, and we have developers. So our small team is situated in almost like a neutral Switzerland to work with a lot of product teams in design and development. And our job is to understand the changing environments and being able to articulate our points of view through different types of mediums. And then ultimately our job is to activate the vision and transform the vision into our products and also our strategies, internally and externally. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So we are unique, I think, inside of Microsoft in that we have this mixed, diverse team. Often, if you look around the organization at Microsoft, you find the functional organization where you have the developers, you have marketing together, or you have a design organization. So we are, I think, unique in that we have design, developers, program management, research, all in one very small team. It gives us a lot of nimbleness and ability to kind of work across the aisle. And on this slide, you see some of the inputs that we use concurrently to do our work. So we have a chance to work with a wide spectrum of stakeholders, all the different product groups that are really important for us when it comes to thinking about the changing world of work and modern life, which is a core emphasis for the company more recently. We work with the field, we work with customers directly because our team also has an envisioning center that allows us to share ideas, insights, provocations with customers and partners. And we also work with groups like HR. We just had a meeting with some organizational development strategists. We work with real estate and facility strategists. We work with all kinds of different groups, which is really, I think, one of the unique features that our team has.
I think something unique about us is that we take a human-centered approach. Typically, when you think about a foresight group, a futures group, especially in the technology industry, you think about we definitely want to be in tune with what's changing. Macro trends, technology shifts, business model changes, all those things. Of course, we track those things, but we also want to understand not only what's changing, but also what's enduring. And these enduring things like human patterns, human emotions, human interactions, social, interactions. We really, really wanted to anchor our vision around human, because ultimately our technologies are to serve the human, humanity. So we take a very serious approach on understanding what's enduring and what are the human patterns. How do we serve ultimately our users or ourselves?
Yeah, well said. And I think when I reflect on how we spend our time and energy when it comes to research, foresight research, inside research, it is with people that we think we can learn the most from. And Lynn, you mentioned our longstanding partnership with IFDF. I mean, you've been an amazing source for connections and just wonderful people that we met through you. And so when we meet these people, we try to befriend them, we try to hang out with them, spend time with them. And sometimes we capture these conversations on video because we've learned over the years that it's very powerful to have these storytelling tools, both inside the company as we activate our thinking, our learning with stakeholders, as well as externally. And we actually believe very much in sharing what we learn in the open source model. So you can, for example, find some past examples of our research when you go to microsoft.com/future of work. There's a series of conversations we had over the years with folks. Let me see. Do you want to talk a little bit about some ethanol work we did recently?
So we also explore ultimately the real users, real people in the wild, we say, try to understand the needs and unmet needs, unmet emotions, needs to fulfill these certain human emotions. So we like Lynn knows that we do a lot of the ethnographic research. We get into, we call it to the edges to understand the common patterns across the edges. And through these common patterns, we try to understand what are some of the new opportunities. When we go out to the field, we really spend deep, quality time with people. And unlike a lot of product teams that also do a lot of these investigations, we don't have a lens, we don't have a product lens. We don't go in to say, hey, what kind of gaming device do you wish to have? We try to understand play and entertainment and spending time together. We don't try to understand, how people want to schedule or do their to-dos. We try to understand what they want to achieve and what's their dreams and hopes in life. So from that bigger context, we try to understand, the why people do things, who they are, how they are reflected in their behaviors and aspirations. And then from there, we try to understand what are the things they do and what are the desires and needs around that. So from that, we develop future products.
And just to round out the introduction quickly, some of the things we also do is sharing some of our thinking and learnings and work on stages at conferences, keynotes, and we try to use some of our own homegrown prototypes to do that using some presentation tools that are a little bit different than the PowerPoint version you can find on your laptop and PCs. We also create vision videos, and we have done so for many years. It's been a while that we released one, but those are helpful to us to kind of create a blueprint of thinking that could then also manifest itself in our Envisioning Center, which I think we have a picture of here. That's a space that's part of our Executive Briefing Center here in Redmond. We get about 800 customer engagements, partner engagements every single year. There's also about 20-25% of internal engagements that we do with product teams and design teams to kind of share thinking and learn from them. So it's been a very fruitful platform for us to share, to have dialogue, to farm questions, to understand what is relevant as we design these experiences and prototypes, roughly set 3 to 5 years out. So here you see one example that's kind of we call it our next generation meeting scenario. And it's been wonderful to see how much interest that actually spurred in the product groups. And now a lot of those concepts and ideas are actually finding themselves into our product roadmap. And then finally, we love to bring people together, to have convenings that allows us to bring senior Microsoft executives together with some of the amazing people we meet in our learning journey. And so we've done a few salons in New York and Los Angeles. We're planning one in New York right now. That is, think of them as like handpicked 65, 75 people that spend a day together, and it's a mix of inspiration, learning, and hands-on workshopping.
Yeah, on stage actually you can see David Lee, our friend, through introduction through IFTF and Lynn, that we went to Shenzhen and we brought him back to meet with a lot more folks internally and externally, have a rich discussion.
And then finally, I think one of the key ingredients for us as a team is to really bring a lot of people in our process of learning, research, prototyping, iteration cycles. And so here you see a couple of pictures how we use very analog tools. We like to use a lot of large paper printouts on cardboard boards, and then we kind of walk people by and we capture their ideas and inputs, and we do this over and over and over again. Literally, with this project, we probably have done 100 of those meetings. And that's very costly, but it's also, I think, in the end, the reason why these ideas spread and why people feel like we've been part of this journey. That wasn't just the small team out there that worked on this project. Yeah, we love the idea of working in open. And in this case, we using these open boards to kind of walk the thoughts with folks. You can see Satya in the picture. We also reach a lot of, hands-on designers and engineers, and you see all these stickies are their ideas. We start with some of our perspectives and half-baked. We tell them this is half-baked. We don't have this story yet. And every time people come in, have a conversation with us, they add their ideas, and we add their ideas. So the next group of people can see the previous ideas. So that's the way we start to kind of have that more coherence in our vision, because everybody coming from a different product group, they'll have their perspective. And typically, it's valuable for them to see others' ideas. So, Lynn, why don't we pause here to see if you have any questions comments so far?
Thank you. That was a really great overview. So it sounds like you have your research activities, you have your sharing activities, you have your activation activities, and all of these are very iterative and build on each other. I wanted to move into kind of a concrete example, if you could, so that we can understand. I know that one of the things I think that's common in foresight practices inside large organizations is you have multiple audiences, multiple stakeholders, and you're delivering your foresight in a lot of different ways in different contexts. So let's just choose one, if you would, to get things rolling, and give us an example of a foresight project that you're proud of, that you feel has been quite successful, and maybe just sort of walk us through how you did it and what it is and what the impact has been.
Cool. We wanted to talk a little bit about a line of work we've been engaged in for about 1.5 years now, I think. And that's really around how value gets created in organizations, and this broader shift that we've been noticing for some time now that is moving from more hierarchical organizations and structures to bottom-up, networked, dynamic, fluid, emergent systems. And so we have been on a very broad explorative learning journey and really trying to understand, what is going on, and talking to practitioners, thought leaders, academics, people from small and large organizations very broadly, to see, are there any patterns we can detect that would actually help us at Microsoft ultimately provide better products and services for people working in this new way that's much more organic. And just to give you a few examples of people that we met, we talked to folks at Stanford D School, and they have a very interesting way of connecting universities and students from around the world in their design thinking and learning projects. We talked to Marianne Goodell, the CEO of the Burning Man Project, and learned a ton about why this global phenomenon has these attractive magnetic powers. They have a clear set of articulated values that they share, and there's actually events happening around the world. So there's many other people and organizations and cases that we studied, but in particular, what we wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper on is the connection that you provided to David Lee in Shenzhen. And we ended up spending a good week out in Shenzhen to try to understand what is happening. Why is Shenzhen turning into this powerhouse of hardware innovation? I mean, do you want to maybe go a little bit deeper into?
Yeah, so we were intrigued and curious about coming from understanding innovation, how innovation happens. The typical Western, companies developing products, keeping everything internal, and protect their IPs, and at the speed, developing products at a certain product cycles. It's very top-down, approach, traditional. So we wanted to kind of go to the other end of the spectrum to say, okay, how do we think about innovation in a network form? How do we think about innovation that has no center, that has no top, there's no protection sometimes, but there's a much more fluid ways of exchanging ideas and also aggregating capabilities. So through the introduction with Lynn, we met David Lee, and he turned out to be a huge hub of connections. And we went to Shenzhen to see this the center of hardware development for the world. They developed like more than 90% of the internet connected devices for the world. So we wanted to understand this dynamic, and we went to not only understand a particular product, but we wanted to understand the culture. So we talked to people who are creating incubators, we talked to entrepreneurs, we talked to design firms, we talked to people who are creating new museums for the city, we talked to people who are city planners to kind of look at the history and the future of Shenzhen, but also looking at the ecosystem, the Pearl River region. How is that situated and how our talent and resources and ideas, kind of come together. And so we learned a whole bunch from it. It really challenged our assumptions, in terms of the speed, how they call the Shenzhen speed, and how things that move so fast and so chaotic sometimes, but then there are certain orders. And they have the ways of sharing, public board, public mold, that they're able to build on each other's ideas and just moving things really, really super fast.
Mhm.
So that's one edge that we went to. And we also investigate other network formats. You want to talk about?
Yeah, I think really, hold on a little bit until we get there. For us, Shenzhen was a great case study and exploration that taught us that there's like so many different ways of how you can think about innovation and innovation practices. And it helped us kind of question some of the long-standing assumptions that we've been seeing all around, including Microsoft. So when we brought Microsoft executives into this activation salon, I think that was one of the stories that really resonated deeply, because so many things we take for granted around here, like how we do product development, how we do innovation management. And that was just like a very insightful way of bringing some people into the conversation that could very deeply share how they operate at a very different level. Ultimately, I think where we gain our deepest learnings and insights is when we find these edge cases that operate under different assumptions. And that really helps us formulate some of the provocations and spawn some of the conversations that we want to have with our internal stakeholders. So this is still work in progress, but we, I think, have succeeded in planting a lot of seeds. And since we launched this investigation into networks, have then decided to actually go deeper into one particular space. And so we wanted to share quickly with you what that space is. So traditionally, we've done a lot of work around large enterprise companies. That's the bread and butter revenue model for Microsoft. That's where a lot of our customers are. We wanted to go deeper into the purpose-driven organization space, and we think there's a lot to be learned. And so for the last 6 months, we've been talking to a lot of founders, executive directors of purpose-driven organizations, nonprofits, B-certified corporations. And what we found, I think, to kind of summarize it very quickly, is that they are amazingly effective operating models for impact, social impact. And sometimes it's astounding what a small, tiny staff of 5 or 10 can accomplish. And the way they do that, I think, is different from how most large organizations are currently thinking about conducting their business. So that's another example of a learning journey that we're on right now that is happening as we speak. And actually, we have an interview later today with one organization.
Yeah, that speaks to the method that we try to go to the edges. Mm-hmm. The edges of these people, they're super scaled. For a staff of 4, they try to reach 40,000, 5,000 in 50 different cities. We see these stories emerging that how they're able to engage people in the network in their communities, with different spectrum of different types of engagements. How do they aggregate? How do they cohere their vision? How do they move fast? So they're able to really, really create huge impact with very, very limited resources. So we understand, how does that happen? If we can learn the secret sauce from that, can we create tools or policies and experiences to unlock a lot of possibilities, either in traditional or organizations on more constrained.
Cool. Let's see if.
Great. So thank you so much. And it's just to kind of summarize, your big research question here is, how will we organize ourselves differently in the next 5 to 7 years? Is that right? Is that the time frame that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think it's usually we say 3 to 5 years, but it's very blurry.
Okay.
And I think the research question for us is really to see, if the thesis is that these organizations operate differently, then what what is it that's different, what can we learn, and ultimately, are these ways of how they operate applicable to other domains, and how can we support this better in the future?
Right. Yeah, it's so smart. I mean, you're just trying to enlarge Microsoft's understanding of what work is, what productivity is, what collaboration is, just continuously opening up that space based on these edge cases and edge findings. So super interesting. I know we're getting a lot of questions, so I want to move on to our final question that I have for you, and then we'll open it up to the questions from our other folks. Can't let you go without asking you, what are your some of your key challenges that you're working with, that you're dealing with right now, or maybe perhaps some of them are enduring, probably they are. Just give us a sense of what's top of mind for you with things that you're trying to do differently or change.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest challenge in our domain is to actually have impact with our key stakeholders. I think we can do amazing work, we can generate amazing insights, but if we are not changing people's thinking and behavior, what does it matter? So over the years, I think we learned some tricks, but what's clear to me is like Microsoft is not a homogeneous culture. There's hundreds of microcultures, and for us to be able to be effective in influencing people's thinking about the future and how they want to do R&D and prioritization of strategy, we really need to understand how they operate and where they're coming from. And that takes a lot of time. And I think over the years, we realized it is necessary for us to make these investments, but it's still a challenge. And so to understand what is their rhythm of the business, when are they actually open for receiving ideas? Just because we happen to have some cool insights doesn't matter that they want to be in sponge mode soaking this up. So that's one challenge, is to kind of understand their rhythm of how they do their business. Another one is just culture and language. Like, how do you talk about these things? I strongly believe there isn't one simple PowerPoint deck that will serve all the needs. Some people want to see the data and they want to go really deep on the stuff. Other people do just want to hear a warm, inspiring story. And then there's a wide spectrum of in between. Do you want to add to that, maybe?
Yeah, in particular, I think we're unique in a way that a big part of our impact resides in can we actually influence engineering?
Right.
And we're a design team, and you know how people are talking a different language in design, sometimes in engineering. And so sometimes it's challenging when engineers, they're makers. They like to think about the world through what they make. You know, if they're making a mouse, they're making a screen, they're making an Excel spreadsheet, they see the world through that lens. So you kind of have to lift them out of that and teach them how to see broader and deeper. So we use different formats of stories. We bring people, the humanity into the discussion. We don't just create a beautiful video portraying the future. We also get to the people's kitchen. We have films made from the ethnographic research to really, really get people in touch with the humanity we need to serve. And everybody has that. This is universal, but the engineers tend to forget it sometimes. So you want to remind them in different approaches and get them to really understand not just what they should pay attention, not just to what they make, but understand the context and intentions of people and understanding the more higher purpose that our tools need to serve.
Great. Before we, and there's actually a lot of questions around implementation, so I'm going to get to those in a moment. Can you say just a little bit about how your work is evaluated internally? I mean, this is one of the key challenges always for people who do the kinds of work that we do. When you're talking about things that are emergent and you're very upstream in the design process, how does it get evaluated by your different stakeholders?
Yeah, I think it's a tough challenge because there are no clear set of hard metrics that are easy to measure, where we can check the box and say, win, did it. So in my mind, it's a little bit like porn, you know, when you see it, and you see people's eyes light up, and you see them maybe using some of your language, and you see them talking in their meetings with
Yeah.
their internal stakeholders slightly differently than you have observed before. So for us, it's really about influencing thinking, and that is something that takes time, and you need to be very persistent, and you need to be, I think, good at communication, relationship building, and reaching out across the aisle, and being also very humble about what it is that you contributed. And the more other people can embrace and adopt the work that we do, the better for us. And I think in the end, oftentimes you need to just be out of the spotlight and give it to them and make them own the thing, because we're so small in the bowels of Microsoft that we couldn't carry this thing to the finish line anyhow. So if we don't find takers that say, "Yay, I'm gonna embrace that and run with it," then we're not gonna have the impact we'd like to have.
Yeah, so we create things that are easy to be taken, you know, stories and artifacts, and being able to allow others to tell the stories again, because that's when impact happens, when different groups are talking about the same story and they're collaborating with each other. And ultimately, that's a goal we want to achieve.
I think for me, one success metric is if we don't get emails, notifications that ask us to help them think about something or share some of the learning, then I would get nervous. And so I think it's like this idea that people start to value the work we do, and they want us to be part of their whatever planning process, ideation and workshop, and then they invite us, and that's wonderful. I think that to me is one success metric.
Yeah, that's why we keep things, you know, extremely transparent. We open our process, we open our, you know, thinking. The products we make are usually mostly public, internally and externally.
Yeah. I love that. Create things that are easy to be taken. That's a very nice way of putting it. Okay. Thank you, Tessa, for kind of fielding some of the questions that are coming in the chat and in the Q&A. And I'm just gonna, there's a couple of questions around implementation. We started talking about it, around impact and implementation. And one of our good friends and partners at Intel, Shashi Kapoor, has asked, how do you ensure that your business units and product groups actually implement the recommendations and insights from your work? And then there's a related question, which is, once the research and vision is formed, how does it start to be implemented and socialized? So let's just sort of kick off that set of questions.
Yeah, I don't worry too much about policing like top-down implementation of our recommendations. I worry a lot more about, are we actually being seen? Do people even know that we're out there doing this kind of work, if it could be helpful? Because believe it or not, there's lots of people out there that have probably never heard of us. And so even though we've been around for some time, it's not like we can't take it for granted that people would be like, oh yeah, the envisioning team may have some good stuff there. So we continuously need to evangelize also as part of our work. But then if we feel like we have some useful things, to me, it's more important that they look at this as foundational inputs that they can build on, versus they have to implement our recommendations by the letter.
We also try, yes, there are content out there people could find and watch, but we love the approach of, really deep conversations. That's why you saw the boards out there. We constantly talk to people. We get invited when they're in their planning session. We just bring a lot of things in, and then, I think our role is to spark that aha, maybe I should look at this way. So it's through those conversations people will have these ahas. It's harder to do when you're watching or reading a paper.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. A lot of it has to happen in conversation. It's about, improving the quality of the conversation.
Yeah. We also run our own ideation sessions, or we participate in other people's ideation sessions. We'll because it's really important, and it's not just a handoff, like this idea turns into your product, in your product. It's a fusion, and they're gonna have to bring their ideas in. So it's a co-creative process. So we would participate in early fun product development ideation sessions with different product groups, but we also have the Envisioning Center where we could create our own prototypes. So when we do create our own prototypes, we tap into different product teams that are in that space, and using multiple, what are their front end thinking, we can kind of blend it together. So we sometimes have the luxury of pushing it out further, and they have to think about shipping in the next 18 months. So they have a lot of hopes and dreams that if we could include those ideas in a space that's more futuristic, they find satisfaction as well. And then in turn will influence their next wave of thinking.
Great. So this is just a kind of baseline. This is from Maria Pilar Mejia Velez. Thank you. She asks, how do you work or support the different business units across Microsoft? So say a little bit about are you within Office? I know you're located within Office, but it sounds like you support lots of different business units, and how does that work?
Yeah, so we're now part of the E&D product group, Experience and Devices. Then there's one that's around cloud and intelligence, and there's AI. So it's a lot streamlined compared to 5-10 years ago, where we had a lot more divisions, which makes our work a little bit easier. We're also part of a broader design community, and that allows us to have a lot of touch points with different product groups. So I think for us, what we tend to do is leverage existing channels and forums where those groups already come together as it relates to have broad touch points and relationship building. And then on particular projects that we're driving, we're pretty selective when it comes to finding the right partners. And then when we do, we tend to go deep with them. So it's less about breadth and the numbers, and it's more about, I think, being pretty surgical and strategic in terms of finding like-minded partners that understand how we can work, and that can then help us infuse thinking across their organizations.
Great. There's some questions, and I had the same question from Julieta Collart and Christy Stone and Claire Pulio about the team, the Envisioning team itself. Can you talk a little bit about how the Envisioning team was founded and why, and sort of the evolution of the team, the Envisioning team itself?
Yeah, so I've been at Microsoft 15 years, and I think 13 we're kind of in this space that we're still in. And it started out being a very small, tiny team of 3 originally. And it was basically launched through the passion of 1 or 2 people who really believed in creating kind of a small unit, and that happened to be in Office, but it could have been anywhere. But they wanted to really look at the intersection of emerging technology and business value in particular, and tell these stories that weren't told otherwise, but we had the hunch that there was a lot of hunger for it. And so it was a very underground effort. There was no executive champion in the beginning, and that was, like I said, about 13 years ago. And then over the years, I think it started to spread a little bit, that there's some value coming out of this small team. So we got more resources, we got merged into an applied innovation team that was called Office Labs at the time. And that's, I think, when Ming Li joined. And so we were part of a broader team that had a charter of front-end innovation and incubations. And so it felt a little bit more at home, a little bit more like-minded. We didn't have to justify our existence every budget cycle. And now, I think it's really wonderful to see how we've been able to kind of get a seat at the table as it relates to really thinking long-term strategy. Do you want to maybe add to that a little bit?
Yeah, was it a year or 2 ago? We are no longer just serving Office, but more at a broader level. So not just applications, but also hardware. We're able, and because the nature of our Envisioning Center, we create prototypes that are have to have the, the actual hardware and shapes and forms. We also collaborate deeply with.
Yeah, so we have two industrial designers on the team, and we can build hardware prototypes, and we work with Panos very closely in his organization. So I think going back to your questions, we started really tiny, and we continuously were worried about adding value. And I think now that pressure has been lifted somewhat, but there's still, Microsoft never stands still. It's always churning and in flux. So there's always a reorientation of who do we need to meet now, and what are the conversations we need to have now to have impact.
So in terms of the team makeup, we have 2 researchers. You're looking at us. And we have 5 or 6 designers, industrial designers, creative designers, interaction designers. We have program managers that are kind of making sure everybody, actually ship things, and developers that are coding for our prototypes in Innovation Center. We also have folks that are kind of running the center operationally. So it's a pretty self-contained team, but we leverage a lot of outside teams, collaboration, not just within Microsoft. IFTF is one of partners we work with often.
So you guys should do a case study of yourselves to look at the impact of a small group over a long period of time on a very large institution.
Well, I did a case study on you guys, the IFTF team.
Okay, a little bit different question. This is from someone who's thinking about, this is Claire Pulio, she asked, what are 1 or 2 things can a foresight function that is just getting established do to add value in an organization? So I think, a lot of organizations and institutions, public and private sector, are experimenting with foresight, which is, the way that we think things should go in all kinds of products and services. But so for a lot of them, they won't have 15, all the years that you've had and that Microsoft has had as an organization thinking about the long-term future, given your platform time horizon. So what would your advice be for someone who's just kind of starting a foresight function for some quicker wins to add value to an organization?
I would say don't think everything has to be invented here, and don't just think about you have a team of 2. Leverage other people, and there are always people who are more front-end thinking in your product teams. There will be institutions like in Institute for the Future that have been thinking about this forever. So be friends with them, and then the more friends you have out there, the better the vision will be, and more support there will be.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would say aim to have a unique point of view on something and have conviction to stand behind it. I see a lot of folks repackaging things that have just been talked about over and over and over. It's like the hype word du jour. And that, in my mind, tends to be difficult to have impact with. But if you come up with something that, based on your work, that you can really stand behind and say, I think this is a perspective we need to discuss here, and you find the right conversation partners, which is often challenging in the beginning because you may not have the brand yet. So focus on the 1 or 2 people that you think you can influence, and then start from there.
And really be good listeners. Listen for the teams you need to serve, what their concerns are. Listen for your customers, your current customers and maybe potential future customers. Listen to your partners. What are the things that they're creating and thinking about creating. Be listeners first, then be able to curate and formulate your perspective and tell the stories.
Nice. Kind of related to that, how do you figure out which projects are the priorities for you? Because as you said, we're all swimming in work about the future of work. and the future of automation and human machine interactions and all these things. So how do you sort of, how do you choose the projects and prioritize your projects?
I think my intuitive answer would be to think about, because we're designers, we think in design thinking, anything that happens in terms of innovation has to have the desirability. There's a need. It has to be feasible. You can actually make something in, maybe not right away, but sometime down the road. It has to have a business viability. Your company, your business has a channel or exists different partners that can enable these solutions to be brought to life. So I think through these lenses, you can start to see a sweet spot of, what are the needs that could be fulfilled by existing or emerging technologies that Microsoft or your company could create, and then find the kind of the, it's like buzz finding. It's also like thinking about talking to your partners. What are some of the things that they're already kind of on the way of thinking about it? And it's a little bit of this art and science of it.
Yeah, I think it's really tough. I mean, that should be one of the challenges.
Yes.
You asked about earlier. It's like, how do you know where to put your bandwidth, your energy, your time and attention against? And to remember, it took us like a good 3 months to really circle this whole network thing.
Yeah.
Because we had a hunch that there was something there, and especially I think what bothers us, there were a lot of people at Microsoft running around talking about networks, and then when you were asking like, what do you mean? Like, well, what is that? What does it mean to you? There were all kinds of different answers. So it was really a grounding in the concepts. And I think that was one of the starting points for us to say, well, let's go a little bit deeper and see what we can find out. But it took us a while, so I don't want to make it sound like we have that all figured out.
Yeah.
It's a bit messy sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like this balance of, like Ming Li said, you need to have some interest from your stakeholders. Not a ton, but if there's like no one ever interested and wants to talk to you about it, that's probably not a good thing. And then I think it needs to be, it needs to have a high degree of uncertainty and ambiguousness. So we don't go into spaces where you can just read a bunch of research and a week later you're like, okay, I have the space figured out. It has to be a meaty space to explore.
Yeah, and I also learned that, sometimes you need to be a little bit brave, and also are naive to kind of ask the sometimes seemingly very dumb question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everybody's talking about networks. Networks is going to be the thing. What do we mean by networks? How do we know if what's the structure? What is boundary? How do we think about networks? So asking that very fundamental, simple question. The other question we asked was, to help define the vision, of Microsoft helping people to achieve more. That's in our mission statement. We want to help every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. We're like, what does achieving more mean? We're asking those very, very fundamental questions, and do people from different cultures want to achieve differently? Do people, we tend to operate in an enterprise environment, future work, and what about life? Is that the same? So asking those very, very simple questions and be able to kind of create some deeper understanding and bring it out to a form for people to grasp. That's part of our.
I think that's really smart. I mean, and it's sort of the way that IFTF works as well in terms of designing our research agendas, is identifying sort of some really critical linchpin concepts that everyone is talking about and kind of betting their futures on and designing for, and then really trying to unpack and problematize and, just open up new thinking on that space. So that seems like a really good, just overall tactic. So a quick question about, will you be holding salons in San Francisco?
We always want to host salons. We have one coming up in New York.
I love San Francisco. Nothing planned right now. The next one is going to be New York. But if anybody out there has a good reason why we should do that, let us know.
Okay, maybe you should come down and do one in and at IFTF. That may be an easy thing to do. Okay, and then we have a question from our former colleague, Gabe Harp, who writes, one thing that is on a lot of people's minds right now is the pressure that technologies place on de-skilling and reskilling, and how often that seems to leave some folks behind, or even how it may contribute to certain inequities in education, access, and learning. And I know you think about this a lot. So the question is, what kinds of lessons have you picked up from your foresight work about how to create empathy for those kinds of pressures in the design, engineering, and marketing phases? And how do you facilitate competing values?
Yeah, that's a great question. I could spend like a lot of time trying to unpack that, and maybe just like a top of mind, and you chime in. One of the things that we learned over the years is like the importance of taking people in, whether it's engineering, marketing, design, out of their comfort zones, which could be Building 32, a Microsoft headquarters, and then bring them into the field and actually have them observe and spend time with some of those people, because I strongly believe that there's not going to be a solution without these folks. We can't just subscribe some massive policy change top down and then think we can roll that out, I think. So the first step to create empathy for me would be to say, let's bring these people together and start a conversation and allow them to really understand their context, their background, and where they're coming from. So we just went on this learning journey with a partner who's looking at social impact organizations, and equity and access education is a major theme. And we have seen a lot of different approaches. I think all of them include bringing these people together and making them part of the solution.
Yeah, I think the approach that we're taking is not looking at what's already been done, but what's not been done. You know, so the going out there to you know, understand social impact organizations. You know, they have their missions to reduce, you know, the impact of war, you know, stop hunger, you know, creating equity in education. All those things are happening that are, how can we understand at the common thread, what are the things that are missing in terms of what can we help them? So if we can empower them, then we trust that these different edges are gonna do their great job. Also,
or amplify their learning,
amplify
because they do great things today.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of internal groups also kind of focus on these aspects, the AI and ethics. So we tap into their perspectives. They have their own deep research and knowledge. So whenever we create a future prototype that's meant for conversations, we would include them in the process of creating them, and also include them in the conversations once it's created out there, to say, okay, we have a prototype that could order your ticket for you, knowing your data, and you know, does that have a weird effect on your psyche? You know, once some people experience a certain solution, the human instincts will kick in to say, oh, this is not quite right. You know? So we bring these prototypes out there to stimulate the further thinking, so we don't have to go down the wrong path once the product is being you know, is going through the productization process.
Yeah,
we try to catch these things before it actually happens.
So that's, I mean, what I'm getting is, it's like each phase of what you do is critical. You couldn't not do any of the pieces that you do. You couldn't not do the research. You couldn't not do the sharing. You couldn't not do the activation. You couldn't not do the evangelizing. I think we have time for one last question, which is, let's see, fighting short-termism and why the work isn't at a larger scale. This is from our colleague Noah Manduk, who asks, do Ming-Li and Harold think that one of their objectives is to help Microsoft overcome institutional forces of short-termism in the organization? And why are these kinds of foresight practices so scarce amongst large-scale organizations?
Yeah, I think we definitely believe in projects that have deep value, and we know how hard it is to work on them and how long it takes sometimes. I mean, many are multi-year journeys, and they don't fit neatly in 90-day boxes to be reported on at earnings calls or whatever. I actually believe that Microsoft's culture is one that values these long-term views. When you look at the investments, just one example, in our cloud infrastructure worldwide, that has been underway for a decade. And there's a reason why we have more regions around the world than Amazon and Google together, because every year we've been doing deep investments in data center infrastructure around the world for a long time, knowing that at some point, if we don't have this hyperscale capacity, we're not going to be a player. And having worked in Office for a long time, the ability to say, and that was back in the days, 2010 maybe, we pick a launch date 3 years out, and then we're going to ship that product. And it actually worked, is pretty amazing. Today's world is very different. You have to ship every day, every week. But there's still, I think, a sense for it takes a long time to build certain capacities and to engage with certain stakeholders or audiences. So I feel pretty good, speaking from Microsoft, that we actually have a right balance there. I'm not quite sure how to answer the question for other industry players, but I would say it goes back to, you have to have conviction in the value of the work you do, and that it sometimes takes a long time to unlock that value with the right group of people.
I think short-termism is not a bad word. That is how products, get out the door and serve the immediate needs of people. It's how do we think about product cycles? We maybe think about 3 cycles out, 3 to 7 years out, and product teams have to think, the next cycle. But how do we allow for that coherence, thinking at the value level? What are the key values we aspire to serve for society? So our work tends to be more value driven, and value transforms to different product area investments. And product area investments, maybe second 2 cycles out, you just identify the the different opportunity zones, and then these opportunity zones are hinged on the further out values that tend to be enduring, because it's anchored around human needs, and then translate to midterm opportunity areas, and then translates to different product solutions, the how you deliver that value. And so some of the things that are being shipped in the short term needs to kind of have that laddering up and connection. So our job is to be able to articulate what that further out means, but truly get the product teams to kind of understand it and sign up and plug in and collaborate with each other. So they're not siloed. That's a huge challenge as well. That they each kind of have their tunnel to dig, but and ultimately they're not coming together. So it's having that shared vision hinged on more longer term enduring things is important for us.
I think that's, we're 1 minute over. That was a brilliant summary of basically the strategic value you're providing, you and Harold and the team for the whole organization, the way it fits into sort of current product development cycles. I want to thank Ming Lee and Harold so much. This was really fun. Maybe we can do a salon in the Bay Area. Ming Lee and Harold said, you guys invited people to find you on LinkedIn. I think you're easy to find there. And for the rest of us, please do stay tuned for our next webinar information. We'll be inviting Foresight practitioners like Ming Lee and Harold to talk about what they do. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Lynn.
you for having us.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.